Just to close off now, I want to return to some ideas that we introduced in section 3 of these videos, which is this map, if you like, of different pedagogical modes. So if you like, in terms of this map, what didactic pedagogy was pretty good at, to be quite frank, is conceptualizing by naming things called nouns or verbs, conceptualizing with theory, which is let's work out what a novel is, for example. And it was a bit abstract and a bit dry, but those kind of intellectual processes were quite valuable. Authentic pedagogy was pretty good at was experiential stuff, experiencing the known, experiencing the new. That's the terminology that we use. What functional literacy is pretty good at is, I dare say, analysing things functionally, how texts work, and applying appropriately, getting that right. But these other two remaining pieces of this other side here are really the kind of flavour and the focus of critical literacy pedagogy, which is analysing critically, working out what the purpose of the texts are, whose interest it serves, what the underlying agenda is. And by the way, that helps us explain the form of the text as well. And applying creatively, which is build new media texts, build texts that express your identity in your own kind of way. So if you like, this diagram here becomes a map where we can roughly, it's not a direct alignment, we can roughly map these pedagogical approaches into this diagram. One of the things we want to say is across these 4 approaches, we don't really want to be dogmatic, we don't really want to be didactic. We don't want to say, one of them's better than the other, particularly. Yes, each has their strengths and their weaknesses, but a kind of a holistic and rounded and effective literacy pedagogy might be one we want to suggest that weaves backwards and forwards between these different knowledge processes and therefore appropriates the best of each of these pedagogical traditions.
We have looked at the different pedagogical approaches to literacy. We've looked at didactic pedagogy and authentic pedagogy, functional and critical approaches to pedagogy. But if I just take one example, I'll go back to the example of water and a pond. If we look at the choices that are available to us, depending on the group that we have, a group of learners, we can start from their experiences of water or a pond, if that's what we're looking at, and talk about what they know and understand from their engagement and their use of water or their experience of it in any context. We could also perhaps introduce them to a pond, a group of learners who might never have been to such. So that's experiencing the new, taking them to observe, to look, to collect data, what's growing in the pond, what colour is it, where's the water flowing from, testing the health of the water, experiencing the new in order to try and become very familiar with the features of any particular pond. We can then go into conceptualizing, and we could start off by naming the features of the pond and the properties of the water. We could then go theorizing about the way in which water interacts with other elements, with soil or with toxins that might go into the water. What kind of theories do we have about what happens when a pond gets polluted? We can then move into thinking in a functional kind of way. What is water for? Why do we need a pond? Is it just for the sake of aesthetic? Is it because it's a catchment for a flood area? Is it a source of water for us? What's its purpose? How does it sustain us? And then we can critically analyse the pond and the water in it. Is it still good for us? Is it polluted perhaps? Is there any way that we can understand how we can use it for a range of purposes, maybe watering a garden? Who has access to the water? Who doesn't have access to it? That's putting a critical lens on that same topic area. And finally, there are 2 ways of applying that knowledge and being transformed as learners. One is by appropriately responding to a set of questions, perhaps some kind of test or a quiz or an essay or some kind of assessment criteria that judges what we've learned through experiencing and conceptualizing and theorizing. But even more importantly, how could we think creatively about water or the pond that we've been examining? What ideas might we have for improving the quality of the pond? What uses might we have for the water beyond the uses that we experienced? So the learner and the students and the teachers move in and out of these different pedagogical approaches depending on what the learner needs, depending on what the class needs, and depending on what the goal of the subject area is. The teacher requires a repertoire of approaches to any particular area, and that repertoire is determined by the knowledge that the students bring to the exercise, the knowledge and skills and activities that the teacher brings to the students, and how those interact ultimately to transform the learner so that they become experts in this particular domain.